Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about animation. And animation is one of those things that for me, it brings a lot to the user experience. I love just having small animation just to guide the user and to bring the page a little bit to life. So today we're going to start small, we're going to start simple, and we're going to explore animations as concept. So in front of us here, we have a card, basic card of a restaurant. We have an image, we have a title, we have a description, and we have this favorite um, button here, or icon. Now, if we take a look at the code, this is written in React, but the principles here are going to be the same for any framework or even plain JS if you're using that. And we have a single card on a single page app, and the card is structured like this. It's an article. It has a header and a footer. And we basically have an on click here that toggles this state. So at first it's set to false, and then when we click it, we just flip the state, so it goes from being false to true, and if it was true, it will go to false. And that makes it so that we can click this back and forth and see that it changes its shape. And basically what that's doing is it's triggering this render favorite function, which is just swapping out the icons that we're using. All right, so that's the basic structure. Now we're going to look into how to animate this. And what I'm thinking is that when I click this favorite, I want it to sort of bounce a little bit. So I want it to expand, and then at a certain point, I want it to retract back in to its original form or shape. So we'll achieve this by using a concept called keyframes. And we'll go ahead and code it out, and then we'll see how it works, and we'll talk about it. So let's jump back into the code. And we're going to go and take the CSS file, open it up, and we'll create a keyframe called bounce. So this is the name of the animation, and this is the definition. So we're saying we want a keyframe called bounce, and whatever we put inside these brackets here, that's what it's going to do. So we are going to have the 0%, and we're going to have the 100%. Now, what does this mean? Well, an animation runs over time. Let's say we have, just to make a quick little sketch here. So let's say we have an animation that runs over 2 seconds. Now, we'll have the start is going to be 0 seconds. It's going to be here, and the end will be here. So on this spectrum, you have 0, which is this point, and you have 100%, which is this point. And then you can add as many points in between. And that's what we are going to do in order to create this bounce effect. So let's just code out the start and end points first. We'll start by setting the 0% to transform, and we'll use scale. This will take the entire icon, and it will slightly decrease the size of it. And we want to make the fill, since this is an SVG, we want to fill the SVG with a color. And we can't use background color for an SVG, we need to use the fill property. We will do RGBA 207 55 55, and we want it to start at 50% opacity, so we'll put in 0.5 here. Now, at the 100% point, we want the transform scale to be 1, which is the initial shape of the heart. And then we'll do fill is going to be the same as here, but now we want that to be opacity 1, which is 100%. So let's check out the browser and see what we have, because this class, oh, actually we need to do one more thing first. Silly me. We need to do card favorite, and that's going to be the class that is added to this one when the heart shows up, the full heart. And that's when we want to add the animation. So here we need to do a little bit of work. So let's go back to the CSS and we'll do animation name. And that's going to correspond to this name here for the keyframe. We'll say bounce. We'll do animation duration. And that's going to be the full duration of the animation. So how long it's going to take to run. And we'll do 0.85 seconds here. We don't want it to be a long animation. We just want it to be a quick animation. So let's try 0.85 seconds and we'll see where we are. Now we'll do animation timing function. We'll just set that to ease in out for now. And then we'll do animation fill mode. And this will be set to forwards, which means that when the animation is finished, it will leave the icon in the state that it ended on. So the state that it is in at 100%, that's the state that the icon will have after the animation has finished. So it won't go back to 0. It will stay stable at 100%. So because if it went back to 0, then we'd have an animation that completed, and then it would reset the heart. So then we will have a heart that's at 50% opacity and at 0.9 scale, and that's not what we want. We want it to be at this state. So now, if we go back to the browser and we click this, you can see it's slightly expanding, but it doesn't have that much movement yet. So we need to keep working on our keyframe here in order to get to a place where it looks a little bit more like a bounce. So we'll head back and we will keep working on this. And what we'll do is we'll add these middle points between 0 and 100%. So at 70%, for example, let's give the transform scale a value of 1.2. So that will just blow it up a little bit at 70%. And then we can make maybe the fill 0.75. And let's copy this and we'll make another midpoint at 80%. And here we want it to be 0.9. So now we want it to go down a little bit again. And we want this to be at probably around 85. Okay, so let's see how this looks. And now it's a little bit more lively. You can see that when we're favoriting, it's blowing up and then it's contracting back in at the end. Kind of like giving it a little bit of bounce, which is exactly what we were looking for here. Now, you can play around with this, play around with the different values, different timing functions, and create different midpoints and just see how this feels. You can basically tweak this to your liking and get the result that you want. There's basically no limit to what you can do in that regard. Just go crazy and try different things out. You might come up with some really cool results. Now, in terms of what we're animating here, you have to be a little bit careful with what you're animating. So the reason we are animating scale here and we're not animating, let's say, with our height is one, scale is easier because it will take care of all of the directions of the element, and you don't have to like keep the width and the height in sync. So that's one reason. But the other one, and perhaps more important one, is that when you're dealing with transforms, it's just usually more performant because a transform is a CSS property that doesn't affect the surrounding elements. So usually when you change the width or the height of an element, that means that the browser now has to recalculate where is everything going to go in relation to this change. So it has to do expensive calculations in order to do that and then re-render the page. With transforms, you skip that mostly. And you can check that if there's a page that you can go to called CSS triggers that will have a list of all the CSS properties and rendering engines and which CSS properties are triggering the most amount of work. So if we find transforms on this list, you can see that a transform usually doesn't trigger any geometry changes or painting, which is very good. And that means that we're just saving the browser and the devices a ton of work when we're using these properties for animation. So with that, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in, and I'll see you soon.